Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for today's Lunch and Learn. My name is Jennifer Travis with the International Franchise Association, and we have a great session lined up for you today. Before we begin, I would like to remind everybody that we are recording today's webinar and we will make it available later this evening on franchise.org. And that if you have any questions for today's speaker, please add them to the Q&A box and they will be addressed towards the end. Today's topic is protecting your brand in the age of experience, and it is brought to us by Voxy. Here to provide today's discussion is Corey O'Donnell. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Voxy, for sponsoring today's Lunch and Learn. I will go ahead and turn things over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thanks for joining us, everybody. I promise to try to keep this brief and hopefully entertaining, although I'm sure if some of you have just finished your lunch, you're probably ready for a nap. And so I'll try to keep the tone low as well. My name is Corey O'Donnell. I am owner and chief consultant of Synthesis Marketing Consultant. So I work with SaaS technology businesses on the concept of storytelling, basically helping them define and communicate their brand. I'm also fractional CMO for Voxy, and so I'm speaking on their behalf today. So I'm also a technology addict, so into all kinds of tech. I've been around franchising since 2005, so I'm a virtual fossil in that industry. And as you can see in the difference between the camera and the photo on screen, I am the reason that AI-assisted headshots exist. What we're here to talk about today is brand. And there's no better place to start than to define what a brand is. Not the dictionary definition, but what is a brand in practice? And from my perspective, a brand in practice is a promise. It conveys to an audience something about the identity and characteristics of an establishment, of a business, of a person, of an entity of some kind. It's really a promise because it makes a commitment. And that commitment is to consistency. The brand promise is the commitment to say that every time you interact with me, every time you interact with my brand, you will feel something familiar. And it's only because of that familiarity that there is meaning. Imagine if you changed your own name every day and someone would try to refer to you. It would have no meaning because there was no consistency in what that label was attached to. A brand is just like that. It is your name in public, and it is the embodiment of your value in market. It's built based on expectation. That consistency is built around expectation. The expectation of value, the expectation of a product, of a service, of a specific kind of experience. The expectation of that experience that I have today, I presume will be the same tomorrow or very similar. Without it, like having no name, there's just no value in the brand itself. And so ultimately, what we want to be able to do is to reinforce that experience. And when the brand matches the expectation, when the experience matches expectation, the brand just gets stronger. And you can see fuzzy down there below is a brand I'm sure you're all familiar with. That logo probably looks familiar. It's an iconic brand known for a consistent experience, except of course, it's not the brand that you were thinking of. That's actually McDowell's from Coming to America. It's very close to McDonald's. The only difference is there's no sesame seeds on the buns. There are arcs instead of arches. Everything's just a little bit off. And so when the experience deviates from expectations, brand is eroded. And this is ultimately what a brand is all about, is trying to ensure that consistency of experience so that the consumer knows who you are, what you do, and why you're valuable to them. Now, consistency can be created in two different ways. One is very personal. If I go to the same massage spot every day and get a massage from the same person, then I'm getting a consistent experience. I'm not necessarily associating that with the brand, however. I'm associating it with Susie, who does my massage. So in franchising, your brand can be personal. It can be about a specific instance of an individual, or it could be something where it's a shared practice that I should expect to see everywhere. And if I asked you all which one was more valuable, I imagine you would agree that the more valuable is a shared experience where everyone knows what to expect when they enter one of your establishments. That's the reason why franchising is a $936 billion marketplace. It's because the premise is that the power of a consistent brand will act as a tide that raises all ships. That's why people want to be in franchising. That's want to be a part of a franchise. It's also why, by the way, that 20 to 30%, franchises who are consistent in their brand perform 20 to 30% better than those who are not. Consistency isn't just a buzzword, it's an economic engine. When you're consistent, you're not just looking less messy, you're actively creating value in the mind of the customer. Now, when you think about brand, there's two types of brands or ways in which brands get created. First is earned, and the second is created or crafted. When most people think of a brand, they typically think of something created, not earned. And they think of that simply because when they think of brand, they think of a logo design or the advertising that's been done. But a lot of you have exposure to brands that have been earned over time. And when you think about an earned brand is one that's implied. It's implied either through endorsement or experience versus a brand that's created where it states explicitly what it is and what it does. For examples of that, think of something like Mint Mobile. Now, Ryan Reynolds is associated with Mint Mobile. We want to be associated with Ryan Reynolds. He's cool. He's Deadpool. So I want that endorsement makes a brand out of Mint Mobile. Apple, on the other hand, doesn't ever really tell you what they do. They do a lot of things, but somehow you can feel that it's about taking complex technology and making it simple to enrich your life and your work. Now, an earned brand is much, much harder. It's much more expensive, and it requires a lot more patience to build versus a created brand, which is one where you just state explicitly, here's who I am, here's what I do, like Brawny, the picker-upper. I'm going to beat you over the head with that message until you remember that that's my value in marketplace. The trick is that those created brands have a shorter half-life because they can tolerate far less consistency. If I buy those Brawny paper towels and they're thin and they don't work, I'm not going to tolerate that more than 1, 2, 3 times before I just give up and say, hey, that marketing slogan doesn't work anymore. It's a little bit different if it's an implied brand, where over years they've proven to me that they can do this. Apple can have a few misses, and I'll forgive those misses. And so it's incredibly important when you think about created brands where you explicitly state your value, that you live up to that consistency promise. So your brand is your promise. It's that promise of a consistent experience that strengthens the connection between the consumer and you every time it's encountered. So the next obvious question is, what is your promise? What does your brand stand for? And this is where in my consulting work, I spend most of my time, is trying to help people craft and understand how to communicate their core value proposition. And it's surprising how often people get this wrong. So even if you have a well-established brand, this is a good exercise sometimes to just look back on and say, are we doing it right? Are we currently communicating correctly in marketplace? And I've got some simple rules, the ABCs of value-based messaging, that'll help to test whether or not your message is quote unquote on brand. Think of it this way. If you were the president of ABC Rain Gear Company and you make a single product, the world's best raincoats, and somebody asks you what you do, there's 2 fundamental ways to answer that question. And I bet you most of you know what they are. The first one is, I make raincoats, of course. The second is, I keep people dry. Now, which is better? I think we would all agree it's the second, because I'm selfish. So I like the latter version because it tells me not what you do, but what you can do for me. And that's what matters to me as a consumer. You know, anyone can give me a haircut. Anyone can give me a haircut. Not that I need one, as you can tell, but a friend can hack your hair and make it look awful. That's just a cut, because that's what I might have been asking for. But what I really wanted was to look stylish, to look attractive, to look sexy. So your promise is a little more than the basic statement in action. It's something that you're going to perform for me that's meaningful and valuable to me. And that's where we get to the ABCs of the messaging. What we want to do first with the ABCs is address a benefit. So we already covered this, but it's what you do for me, not what you do. But that comes with some caveats, because it's not simply about saying I keep people dry. There's a reason I keep people dry in this context makes sense. Yes, it addresses a benefit, but second, it's broad but focused. Now, I know that's a contradiction in terms, but think about it. I keep people dry as a clear value, but it's not directly linked to raincoats. So that means I have the ability to make a meaningful promise, but also one that can expand and adapt. Maybe I want to make boots. Maybe I want to make tents. There's a lot of different things I could do that fall into the realm of keeping people dry that aren't explicitly raincoats. So it's broad enough, but not so broad that it loses all meaning, like I make your life better, or maybe I make you more attractive. Maybe the haircut does make me more attractive, but is that promise fundamentally different than maybe the promise this brand is making to me about making me more attractive? These guys, by the way, do not make you more attractive. They make everyone else you look at more attractive, but that's a very different thing. The third goal in your messaging is to make sure that it's consistent. And the reason it has to be consistent is because what we just talked about so far. It's got to be broad but focused, so it has to appeal to a specific area of my life that you're going to improve. But it also then leaves room to be able to move into other areas. It's consistent with both my past and with my future. I can show I have the credibility providing the value of keeping people dry because I've been making raincoats for years. But if I want to suddenly start doing something else, it leaves me the room to do that. And it doesn't, however, leave me room to start making bicycles. And so this is where most brands fall down. They either overcommit to a narrow view that is inconsistent with where they might end up in the future and is too narrow in its focus, or they go too broad and miss the value proposition to the customer. If you think about people that fail here, this is the copier company. I'm sure you know who that is. But as copiers become less relevant, that company's less relevant. Or maybe you're the film company, Kodak. And as film becomes less relevant, so do you. So it's what your promise needs to be is something larger than a specific form of technology that is tied to today's method of doing things or today's preferences. A broader message that is consistent with who you've been and who you might be is one that's more powerful over time. And then finally, it needs to be simple language. A 6-year-old should be able to understand your value and what you do. It should not have business buzzword bingo and all kinds of terms in it that make no sense to people. I keep people dry as a simple statement anyone can understand. It addresses the benefit. It's broad enough for me to be able to make other things besides raincoats. It's consistent with the fact that I've made raincoats in the past and that I might make something else in the future. And it speaks in a very simple language that anyone can understand. An example of all this sort of put into action is these guys, and I'm sure everyone recognizes this brand. The interesting thing about Nike is that they earned their brand initially. They earned it. They didn't create it. They earned it through endorsements. So they basically tied themselves to athletes and showed those athletes wearing their sneakers. But at some point, they made a conscious choice that said, you know what, this sneaker market is pretty limiting, and we need to do a rebrand. And what they focused their rebrand on was the concept of just do it. And that launched them into the world of empowering athletes and athletics. So it changed them from being a sneaker company to a company focused on empowering athletes and athletics. That means they can start making attire. They could start making smartwatches that track you while you run. They can make golf clubs and all kinds of things associated with athletes and athletics because they broadened their brand and their appeal by creating a brand that was explicitly focused on empowering athletes and athletics and really getting rid of their earned brand associated with sneakers and the endorsements that they had therein. Now, that's hard for any company to craft a good, powerful message and make sure it's something that works and resonates over time. But it's especially hard in franchising because understanding, communicating this is more difficult to in the franchise system just due to the complexity of the relationship between franchisor and franchisee. And in the franchise world, your brand promise is accompanied by 2 additional promises. Of course, you have the brand. So before you sell anything as a franchise, you first sell a franchisee on the promise of your franchise concept. And when you make that pitch, whether you do it explicitly or you imply it, you're basically telling them, I have 3 things to offer you. I have a brand. I have a recognizable identity that customers trust, and you will be better off as part of my franchise than trying to open your own burger shop or your own, handyman business, whatever the case may be. But the second thing is that you offer them an operational playbook. You give them a repeatable system that they can use to deliver that experience. This is where that consistency comes from, because if they follow this playbook, that's why I know I'll have the same experience in Atlanta that I do in LA. And that's how I know that the franchise itself has meaning. The third thing is you sell them the support, the idea that there's tools and training and generalized support to help them succeed as a business. So this is the first promise you're making. You're selling them on these components before you even start to sell anything that you sell through that franchise network. But it's hard in today's world to maintain that brand playbook and support consistency, because digital fragmentation tends to break that promise. It's easier and far more dangerous in today's world for franchises, because franchisees sometimes go rogue. And what I mean by going rogue is, hey, look, rock stars make a lot of noise. It's cool to be a rock star, but choirs create harmony, and harmony is good for a brand. Harmony is when all the music and all the sounds come together and it all just fits. Rock stars, like I said, someone goes off on a loud solo and they can break the brand. But everyone wants to be a rock star. And I'm sure you've heard familiar lines from your franchisees, different excuses for why they don't want to do things the way that a franchisor wants them done. I've been burned before. I followed franchisors' advice and it didn't work out for me. I know my market better than you guys. What do you know sitting up there and wherever you're headquartered versus my experience here in downtown Seattle, wherever I live? You can't prove that it works. So in a lot of cases, you might offer recommendations without data to back it up. You hear a franchisee say, I've done this before. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been in business. I know how to do these things. And after all, it's my money. It's my neck. It's my business that's on the line. I own this location. I'm going to do what I want. And oh, by the way, my mother told me what to do once. Once. That's a joke. So what you want to be able to do is to create that harmony, but it's really hard. But it's also fundamentally essential. And it's even more essential in today's digital world because of how it can get broken and instantly damage a brand. Think about it this way. If a discount code is offered by a franchisee who's gone rogue that isn't honored by other locations, sure, it doesn't happen often, but it can. And then that customer goes to another location and they say, well, sorry, we don't honor that here. They don't blame that one manager. They don't blame that one location. They blame you. They blame the brand. And all those ships start to sink a little bit because the brand is less valuable. Or perhaps they start bidding against each other for ad. That's essentially just paying a tax because you don't coordinate your activities to make sure that you are targeting the right customers in the right locations for paid search ads, for example, and you end up bidding and driving the price up. I've seen that happen hundreds of times in franchise networks, and it's because franchisees go rogue and decide to break the rules and how things get done so they can try to accrue as much business as possible. Where you see a single location sloppy reply on social media or to a review, doesn't stay with them. It goes viral and again, affects the entire brand. And so what can you do about this? 5 basic, simple ideas. The first of which is to strike a balance. And what that really means is being able to convince your franchisees that it's in their best interest to play nicely with the rest of the ecosystem. There's a number of different ways to do that, but one of the cornerstones of being able to do that is this number, 11.7. I've used this in presentations for quite a while and speaking to franchisees because I think it's a magical number. For those that don't know what it represents a number of times that the average American moves in their lifetime. So roughly 12 different times I will pack up my things and move from here to someplace else. When I do that, the experience that I had with your franchise brand where I live today will determine whether or not I stick with you when I go to the next location. And oh, by the way, the experience that somebody else had who's now moving to my city will either replace me as a customer in the existing franchise that I support today, or they won't. And so by playing well with the rest of the family, you end up driving business to one another and creating that tide that raises all ships. If you don't, then that customer, even if they have a good experience with you, it's a different experience. It won't carry over to the next franchise location when they move in that next time in their life. Also, data. Not enough times do people share the information around what's working. Data is the best way to settle a debate. You don't guess, you know, and you make informed decisions. And so it's the ability to be able to showcase to your teams, this is what's working, this is why it's working, this is why you should do it, that is so effective in helping people to come on board. It also means leveraging that data to become the evangelist. If you have proof that something works, make sure everyone knows about it. I've seen in many instances where franchisors don't do a good enough job of communicating down to their locations. Hey, that 11% bump you got last month, that's because of this program that we run. Let me show you the numbers and prove to you that that's why you got that lift. And that helps people buy into the concept of playing better within the brand concept. It also requires that you invite those franchisees to actively participate. Don't put themselves on an island. Don't let them put themselves on an island. If they do that, they're only wasting their own money. They're paying their royalties to the franchise, but they're not playing as a member of the team. They're not helping to build that tide that rises all ships. And so ultimately, they are working against themselves. But you've got to invite that feedback. You've got to invite that dialogue with the franchisees. And then finally, and it's the simplest one of all, is be careful about the tools that you select and leverage the power of laziness, lean into laziness. What I mean by that is if corporate provides good templates, instructions on how to do things, and provides programs that actually work, this is true in operations, it's true in marketing, it's true in every aspect of the business. Lazy people like to just follow what's been done that they know will work. It is the natural human trait. And so if you lean into that and can show people that you have attractive, well-produced examples of marketing materials, for example, you give that local owner less reason to feel like they have to go it alone because they've been given the resources to do the job correctly and to play within the bounds of the brand. As I said, this is all changing dynamically because marketing is changing so quickly. In fact, some of the examples I just cited about where a franchise can go rogue and the impact of that are fundamentally different today than they were just 5 years ago, for example. I think that the traditional methods of marketing are basically dead. And what I mean by those traditional methods of things like search, social, and email. That may sound like a bold statement, but if you think about it, those comfortable systems that we've all relied on are being systematically dismantled by the changes in technology and especially the advancement of AI. I don't know about you, but I don't search Google in the same way anymore. Matter of fact, I don't search Google anymore. I just use Perplexity to get my answers. If I do happen to type something into a browser window, I'm going to follow the Gemini result, and I'm not even going to look at the rest of the links on the page. So search has fundamentally been replaced by AI answers before your link even loads. And so the focus on paid search, on SEO rank, all that stuff, throw it out the window. It's not going to matter this year and in the years to come because habits have changed and AI has completely transformed the ways in which we'll get information. That doesn't mean it won't be replaced by a new paid system that allows you to get placement in AI systems, but we're not there yet. Those systems have not monetized. And so at least for right now, PPC, SEO, more or less dead. And AI-based search is where it's at. So if you're going to invest in making sure that your sites are ranking against how the AI systems scrape those sites and what they look for when we're giving an answer to a customer. On the social front, I think we all know in our personal lives that the ads are just our feeds are just cluttered with ads. They are AI optimized and fed to get as many clicks as possible and to fill our feeds with clickbait. But ultimately, it becomes less and less effective. I can't even remember the last time I engaged with content on social media because it used to be a place I went to connect with people, and now it's just a useless list of ads and other feeds. And email, of course, sort of has long been on the way out. Spam and other filters just mean something I don't even see. So, of course, we have an alternative, and that's who I'm here representing today, and that is the power of the messaging app. And this is undeniable to me. It's funny because it's an old technology, text messaging, and yet today it is probably the most powerful, personal, and preferred way to be able to connect your brand with an individual consumer. Because right now it's where they live. They will ignore your push message. They will ignore an email. They will ignore what they see in their social feed. Nobody ignores when that blue bubble lights up or when that green bubble lights up on their phone and tells them that they have a new message. it gets seen. In fact, the open rate on a text message is 98%, and the redemption is 45% higher than any other form of marketing. That's because it actually gets to the people that you want to get it to. And when you look at those numbers, it almost looks like a typo. It's just astounding how much better text performs. And that's because it gets, as I said, directly to the person that you're trying to communicate with. Now, I'd be wrong if I said that any old text messaging system would work, because you want one that adheres to the principles we've been talking about before in the protection of your brand, the operationalization of your outreach, and the system-wide support. And so the way we implement text messaging at Voxy adheres to those standards. Essentially, it allows corporate to set the templates, to determine compliance and ensure that you're compliant in your text message sends, to make sure that costs are controlled, to set that brand voice, but then deploy those out as assets to your locations so that they can participate in that communication with their local customers, provide that local touch, and get those local connections. With Voxy, what we want to be able to do is to make sure everyone is always on brand, always on message, because every message is on brand with corporate consistency. Every location is on message with local authenticity. Every dollar is controlled for maximum impact, essentially ensuring that the three things that you sell are monitored and adhered to in this most powerful method that you have for communicating with customers. So we're going to protect that brand value with the centralized voice and templates. We're going to operationalize the best practices around how you send text messages. We're going to know what works through data and guide success with system-wide data and cost controls so that everyone in the network can benefit from this marketing communication channel. That's the end of the ad component, and that's also the end of my remarks for today. So thanks again for everyone for joining us. Happy to take any questions that might have come up during the process, but otherwise, very much appreciate your time and listening to me. I'll check the chat here to see what I can see. One more in Q&A. Mentioned Mint Mobile brand is strengthened by association with Ryan Reynolds, and because Deadpool is cool, what equity does Deadpool provide to a mobile service provider? None, and yet a lot. What equity did Michael Jordan provide to Nike sneakers? Do we really think that his talent was tied up in the magic of Nike soles? The reality is that endorsement is an association that says, if I like that person, that thing, that style, that if I have a preference for that piece of content like Deadpool, and you can associate your brand with it, it gives your brand a lift through that association. This happens everywhere all the time. All kinds of endorsements. I mean, if you're a watch person, you're going to see George Clooney wearing Omega watches. If you're into a certain class of jeans, you're going to see, your favorite model or actress wearing those jeans. The idea is that through association, you gain that equity. It doesn't really matter how it impacts the business. Anything else, or back to you?
All right, thank you so much, Corey. That was excellent content and excellent feedback from all of you, and we really do appreciate it. Again, this webinar was recorded, and along with the presentation deck will appear on our website early this evening, and you'll be able to find that at franchise.org. Thank you very much again to our speaker and to the Voxy team. And again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and have a great rest of your day.